we'll continue trying with this. I hope this works. If not, let me know. Okay. So I was just sharing this with you, right? Oh yes. So it was said that Siddhartha, Siddhartha's father, started educating him from a very young age, the age of 3, and started, various arts and math and different kinds of education. And what he unwittingly did by doing so, of course, the more you educate an individual, the more the mind is going to be curious, right? So even though Siddhartha led a sheltered life, he was a very deep thinker from a young child, right? And we know that in the book, it talks about the farm festival where he goes to, and he sees the bird eating the grub that has been turned over. And he laments over this, right? As a young child, he's already thinking. So unwittingly, one could say that even though Siddhartha didn't have intentions of Siddhartha becoming a Buddha, he already put him on that path by educating him from 3 years old. Okay. Another incident as a child, another very famous incident, which I don't remember seeing in the book, was there was an incident with a cousin of the Buddha. His name was Devadatta. Devadatta comes out throughout the life of the Buddha. He's the thorn in the Buddha's side. And there's Devadatta is actually older than the Buddha. And so for many years, actually, because Siddhartha and Queen Maya, they didn't have a child for many years. Devadatta, who was Siddhartha's brother's son, was going to become the heir to the throne. So, of course, when Siddhartha is born, Devadatta is really not too happy with it. And so throughout the life, Devadatta is actually sort of the thorn in the Buddha's side. And there's a very famous story where Devadatta shoots a bird, I think it's like something like a goose or something, in the royal garden with an arrow. And as it comes down, maybe it was a dove. Anyways, he shoots a bird. And when it comes down, it's Siddhartha who actually finds the bird. And Siddhartha wants to actually help the bird to help the bird heal. So he takes the bird, and Devadatta, of course, claims the bird for himself. And so they go in front of Siddhartha, and Siddhartha asks Siddhartha what he's going to do with that bird. And Siddhartha said, I will mend it and let it set it free again. And whereas Devadatta says, that's my prize. And so Siddhartha sees the compassion of kindness of Siddhartha, and he actually gives the bird to Siddhartha. So again, we know from a very young age that Siddhartha was a deep thinker. And then, of course, at the age of 19, and it's written in the book that he gets married to Yashodhara, who comes from the same family as Queen Maya. And Queen Maya, she passes away only a few days after the birth of the Buddha. And Queen Maya's sister, Mahaprajapati, becomes the stepmother for Siddhartha. So it's his mother's sister that basically raises him, right? And then, as I mentioned, he was a great thinker. And even before, so generally when we learn about the life of Siddhartha or the Buddha, we are often told that he's spurred to go on his spiritual search when he goes out the four gates, right? So we talk about that. But by reading this book, the Buddha Dharma, it's very clear that Siddhartha was thinking about things much earlier than when he went out. And just quoting from there, he says, ultimately, to live as a human being is nothing more than to seek for something. There is a seeking that is good and a seeking that is evil. Evil seeking is to seek in the following way. Although one is a being that undergoes birth and gradual aging, one seeks other beings who undergo birth and aging. Although one has a body that falls prey to illness, withers and dies, sinks into depression, and is stained by defilement, one seeks others who suffer the same. What are some of the things that undergo birth? There are such things as one's wife and children, servants, livestock, and gold and silver. Like oneself, these are things that age, become ill, die, sink into depression, and are stained by defilement. People of this world, although they themselves will eventually wither and die, still seek out these things that also wither and die. Moreover, they are attached to and led astray by these things. Good asking is to seek in the following manner. One who undergoes birth observes the misfortune of those that undergo birth and seek the nirvana of unsurpassed calm, which is a dharma that does not undergo birth. Or one who ages, becomes ill, dies, sinks into depression, and is stained by defilements, observes the misfortune of those who suffer the same, and seek the nirvana of unsurpassed calm, which does not age, become ill, sink into depression, or become stained by defilement. And he goes on to say, when I reflect upon myself, I too am one of those who seek things that are unworthy. How foolish. From now on, I must seek those things that are freed from depression and defilement. So we can tell this is before he goes out the four gates, the four excursions. This is before that. It's once he marries Yashodhara, and over the course of 10 years, he starts pondering all these things. So we know that those four gates are basically just almost like the straw that broke the camel's back. We know that he was already thinking about birth and death, right? Interestingly enough, in this passage, he talks about things that are born, and he includes gold and silver. I think there's, as I mentioned last week about Sumida and how Sumida initially learns of suffering is when he's told by his treasurer, that he can't take, or his parents couldn't take all their wealth with them when they passed away. So I think, Siddhartha too, he realizes that wealth, materialistic wealth, is something that we can't cling to. Although we do try to cling to it, inevitably we will lose it. So he continues on and he says, I live in midst of such opulence, blessed with a splendid body. However, what is all this for me when I am attempting to awaken? The people of the world are beings who will eventually age. They are vessels that will become ill. They are beings who will, of their own nature, wither and die. Yet seeing the aged, the sick, and the dead, they view them with distaste. I must not behave like this. Right now, I shall abandon the pride of youth, health, and wealth. Okay. Again, this is prior to him leaving the palace on those four excursions. So he's already well aware of what's going on, right? And then, of course, he does go out those four occasions. And by this time, his father is really worried because he knows that Siddhartha is bound to leave, basically. So when Siddhartha does go on those outings, his father makes sure that he sees no unsightly things. But of course, that can't be helped. So when he goes out the eastern gate, he encounters an elderly person. When he goes out the southern gate, he encounters an ill person. When he goes out the western gate, he encounters the funeral procession. And finally, when he goes out the northern gates, he encounters the mendicant. And at that point, he sort of makes up his mind to leave the royal palace. And although he sees that mendicant, he doesn't go back right away. It's said that he goes into the forest and he enjoys the pleasures with his entourage. And on the way back to the royal palace that evening, he's actually serenaded by, there's a young maiden by the name of Kisagotami. Now, Kisagotami will come back again in later in the life of the Buddha, and she's associated with teachings of impermanence. So, but she comes out at this point just to sort of tell him about how happy people are. Incidentally, while Siddhartha was in the forest with his entourage, he gets word that Yashodhara has given birth to their son. And it's funny because he laments on this, saying, "Oh, there's another thing that I have to detach myself from," and he actually calls his son Rahula, which means fetters, attachment. And so he goes back, and that evening he sees. So once he goes back, he goes to rest, and there are the courtesans, the court maidens. They dance and they sing and they have a very good time. But in that evening, when everything is calm and everybody is falling asleep, he sees their true self. And it says in the book, they have spittle coming out of their mouth and their clothes is all disheveled, and he realizes this is our reality. So he leaves at that point. Now, when he leaves, this is very interesting because he encounters before, or as he's about to leave, he encounters King Mara, right, who tries to dissuade him from leaving the royal palace. And in fact, he tells him, if you don't leave, if you stay, in a few days, you will become a celestial being. And of course, Siddhartha denounces that and says, I don't want that. Now, King Mara, this is very interesting because, of course, he comes out just a little bit later when Siddhartha attains enlightenment. And maybe I'll get back to him at that point. I'll come back to King Mara in a second. But once he leaves the royal palace, right, Siddhartha, first of all, he goes in search of different masters, different teachers. And he starts off by going to visit the ascetic Bhagava. And there, Bhagava tells him of self-mortification, very strict ascetic practice that will lead him to be birth as a celestial being. But Siddhartha realizes even the celestial beings, over the course of many, many years, it might be hundreds of years, thousands of years, eventually they also pass away. So he says, what's the point of becoming a celestial being? Just basically extending my life, but still we're within this existence of samsara. So he leaves Bhagava and he goes to this ascetic called Alara Kalama, who apparently lives on Mount Sumeru. And this Kalama it's teaching the teaching of void, but in this case it's nothingness. And basically nihilism is what he's teaching, that there's no point to anything, that everything is nothing. Okay, but Siddhartha realizes, no, this is still part of delusion. To say everything is nothing, you have to be thinking of that. And so he realizes this is still delusion. So he goes to a third one called Udaka Ramaputta. And this ascetic teaches that it's neither consciousness nor not consciousness. It gets very, very how should almost like psychiatry or philosophy, right? It's neither consciousness nor unconsciousness, right? And still he's not satisfied. So instead, Siddhartha decides to go off on his own, and he actually goes to a place called Rajagraha, and there he meets King Bimbisara. King Bimbisara, it comes out again later in the life of the Buddha. But when the king sees, by this time, Siddhartha has given away all his jewelry and everything, and he's wearing the robes of a monk. And so when King Bimbisara looks at him, though, he realizes there's something different to this monk. And he says to him that, even though you're dressed like a monk, you must have come from a royal family. And so Siddhartha, at that time, still Siddhartha, he, explains who he is. And King Bimbisara offers him half of his kingdom. He's so impressed by the demeanor of this individual. And of course, Siddhartha refuses, and King Bimbisara says, when you attain enlightenment, I will become your first disciple. And so King Bimbisara becomes a very strong follower of the Buddha. And again, later, King Bimbisara is very important in our Pure Land teachings. And we'll get to that a little later. But so here, after he parts with King Bimbisara, Siddhartha goes off to the forest. He's still with his loyal serf, Channa, and he Siddhartha is very famous. He cuts off his hair, long locks. He cuts it off, and he says, if I am to attain enlightenment, let this hair not fall to the ground. And he throws it up to the sky, and it says the hair is suspended in the air. And according to the text, at that point, Indra, who is the king of the heavenly realm of the 33 devas. Remember the realm that's on the very top of Mount Sumeru? It said that this Indra catches the hair and puts it in a jeweled box in this heavenly realm. Okay. And that actually reminded me of a joke that I had heard. I don't even remember which sensei told me. And I'm going to share this joke with you. This is a joke about there's a Buddhist, a Christian, and a Jewish person. Okay? And they're talking about how they give tithing or donations to their organization, right? And the Christian person says, well, I do a very simple thing. He says, I draw a line in the ground, and I take out all the money I have in my pockets and I throw it up. And he says, what lands on the right side, I give to the church. And what lands on the left side, I keep for myself. And so the Jewish fellow says, that's a good way, but I have a different way. He says, I draw a circle. And he says, I take out all my money and I throw it up, and what lands in the circle, I give to the church, and what lands outside the circle, I keep for myself. And so then the Buddhist says, I have an even better way. He says, I take out all the money from my pockets, I throw it in the air. What stays in the air, the Buddha keeps, and what comes down, I take back. Okay, and that comes from this story of Siddhartha throwing up his hair and it being suspended in air. I don't think you were expecting to hear a joke tonight, but there's my corny joke for tonight. Okay, I'm trying to keep in par with Ken Tanaka, because he always tells corny jokes. In fact, that might have been one of his jokes for all I know. So then Siddhartha decides he's going to do ascetic practices. And here, again, we see, I guess, the love of his father, Suddhodana. Even though Siddhartha has renounced the royal throne, has left the royal palace, has become a mendicant, a nomadic ascetic, his father can't leave him alone. So he actually sends 5 of his top young uh, guards or people of the court to sort of watch over Siddhartha. And they end up becoming the 5 mendicants that practice with Siddhartha. Okay, so they practice, and you've probably read the description of the kinds of things that Siddhartha did during his 6 years. Sometimes he would only eat 1 meal a day, or 1 meal every 7 days. Sometimes he would stop drinking water. And there's a whole little description of when he does the practice of not breathing, that after holding his breath for so long that the air came rushing out of his ear, like, and they said the bellows of blacksmiths, right? So it came rushing out of his ear, he said. And when he stopped that, his head was becoming light and uh, dizzy, right? So Siddhartha goes through all this, but of course he finds in the end, even though he's able to attain a certain consciousness, that this wasn't the ultimate way. It is said, and this is actually a very famous statue, and you may have seen this statue before. Some of you may have seen this statue before. Let me just. If you see a statue that looks like this is the statue of Siddhartha in his ascetic practices. And it was said that he basically became skin and bones. And so in the book, it also describes if he rubs his belly, he could touch his spine. And similarly, when he rubbed his back, he could touch his stomach, it was said. So he was basically down to skin and bones. And yet he continued. And in the end, he realizes this was not the way. And so he ends up giving up the self-mortification, and he bathes in the river and takes, there's a young maiden by the name of Sujata who sees him, and she mistakes him for being a sort of a forest god. And so she makes an offering to him, and Siddhartha takes that and regains his strength. And then he then proclaims, that he sits under what was known as a pipala tree. We call it the Bodhi tree now. And he proclaims that, he will not move until he attains enlightenment. And over the course of the evening, there's a great battle that ensues between him and Mara. And here again, I bring back Mara, okay? Mara and his minions. And in fact, the cover of the book, the Buddha Dharma, has that very image on it of Siddhartha and Mara and his minions. And so Mara, first of all, sends his daughters to try to tempt him. And of course, Siddhartha says, well, from past karma, you are presently in this beautiful form, but you will ultimately get old and die. And sure enough, right before his eyes, they start turning very old. And then Mara gets very upset, and he sends his forces to attack him. But no matter what, whether they throw spears or arrows, it all turns to flower petals. And you all probably know this story. And so then Mara gets very angry and says, "Who are you to, you're not worthy of what they call the diamond throne. And Siddhartha says, as the earth is my witness, I alone am the one that should sit on that throne. And so in this picture on the cover, you'll see Siddhartha with his hand touching the earth. And so if you see a statue, if you see any statues of Siddhartha with his hand touching the earth, that is the statue of when he attained enlightenment. Okay, so you'll know exactly what that is. And at that point, then Mara then tries to dissuade him by saying, "Oh," he sort of changes tactics, and he becomes very friendly and says, "Oh, why are you doing this? You know, you're down to skin and bones, and you know, why don't you get nourishment, and you know, why don't you enjoy what you have?" And of course, Siddhartha doesn't listen to any of this. But what's really interesting about all of this, and I brought it up here. Yeah. Okay. So earlier, before he left the royal palace, Mara was trying to dissuade him, right? And now he's opposing him directly during this great battle. When you look at who Mara is, it's very interesting that Mara is actually the king of the highest heavenly realm, the realm of controlling others' emanations, the Parinumi. I don't know how you even pronounce that in Sanskrit. It's written there. Somebody, Durgis might be able to pronounce it. I'm sure he can pronounce it a lot better than I can. But Mara is actually, so this realm, the realm controlling others' emanations, is the highest realm of existence. So when we look at this existence of samsara, okay, of the realms within the realms of suffering, the highest realm is the Deva realm, right? The heavenly realms, right? And of the heavenly realms, the very highest one, the best one, if you will, is this realm of controlling others' emanations. So that's actually the highest possible realm within this existence of samsara. So Mara is actually the king of all the realms of samsara. Okay, so the reason why he tried to dissuade Siddhartha, and of course went directly against him, tried to battle him, was because he didn't want Siddhartha to go beyond samsara. He wanted him to remain within this circle, okay? Because in the world of samsara or suffering, we go round and round and round and round, right? And so when Siddhartha realizes that he no longer needs to continue in this realm of suffering, he actually, when he attains enlightenment, at that time, he proclaims that this is my last birth, that I will not be born again in this existence of suffering. Okay. So he's transcended this realm of suffering. And so this is where in this tanka, this Buddha is pointing to the moon, that there is something that is beyond this existence of suffering. And so basically he defeats Mara by going beyond the existence of suffering. But of course, if you were in Mara's position, you didn't want that, because the whole idea was to dissuade or to Mara is also known as, where did I put that? King of Death, or sometimes referred to as Mara the Tempter. Okay, so wants you to remain in this existence of suffering, or because he's basically in control of us in this existence. So for him, Siddhartha became the ultimate threat, because now Siddhartha is going to lead others out of this existence of suffering. So this is why Mara wanted to make sure that that wouldn't happen. And so it is said that the Buddha then attains enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. And I think we'll continue on next time. I'll start from here and go from the enlightenment, and as well as the beginning of this, when he starts talking to the Sangha, creating the Sangha. Again, I do apologize for the mistakes, or the difficulties we had. Does anybody have any questions? And you can unmute yourself if you want to. So, you know, all of this, of course, has been told after the Buddha passed away, okay, by his disciples and so forth. So many of these stories, I guess, I don't know. I have yet to see any texts that say that, you know, this is what the Buddha said, but it was more, this is what his disciples said about the Buddha, right? So because I don't know how it would seem self-serving to say, oh, you know, I was Sumida, who was this, lived in this other existence and was in Tusita heaven, and I don't think that would happen. But I think the disciples of the Buddha, they're the ones that saw, and it comes out actually in our Pure Land Sutra that the disciples recognize the greatness of the Buddha. And in fact, the next talk, when we talk about the Five Mendicants, people recognize the greatness of the individual without you know, that individual saying, I'm the honored one, right? I think it's more the other way around. People understand or see. So were you able to hear me today, or was there still problems? It worked out okay afterwards? Okay. Okay. Good. I'll try to get this fixed by next week. I don't know what's been going on with both the temple and my house. Our internet seems to be acting up. Any questions or comments or?
I send
Atsumi-san, I got your questions and I will write back to you.
okay, thank you very much.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And if you want to email me questions too, that's fine. So we'll continue from here next time, and I'll talk about actually after he attained enlightenment, and then go on to his disciples.
Reverend Grant, what page do you want us to read up to?
Actually, you don't have to read anymore. I mean, you can if you want to, but the pace I'm going at, we're still quite a ways back from where I asked you to even read last time. So if you want to read ahead, you're more than welcome to, but it's going to, there's so many little things that I've been distracted to, or the things that I think make it interesting to know. Things like, you know, who Mara is, for instance, rather than just saying he was this satanic type individual. I think it really means something when we realize he was actually the king of all this existence of samsara, and he's trying to prevent the Buddha from going beyond that, and that's why he really has to battle him.
The book is surprisingly easy to read, and
Yes.
it really helps with you enhancing, the idea of which character is which in the play, because I don't really know any of those players. But coincidentally, I didn't get all the reading done, and you only took us up to the point where I got to. So I got catching up to do next week.
Well, yeah. So as I mentioned last week, I believe that this is going to be a journey. So it's not. I don't expect to, it's not like a university course where I say you have to read 60 pages and then we're going to be testing you on the contents of those 60 pages. But I think it's more interesting to just take our time and sort of, it's like wine. Hey, maybe next time we should have wine as we're doing this.
Yep.
But you're enjoying the journey is what it is. So
It is very good. Thank you.
That's great. Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you very
you,
much.
Thank you,
Sensei.
everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you,
Thank
Grand
you,
Sensei.
Sensei.
Thank you,
Bye, everyone.
Sensei.
Thank you very much.
Much.
Sensei.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.